It's my great pleasure to welcome you to another seminar in the Program of Modern Poland seminar series this semester, which is devoted to Poland and its place in the global world, into international relations. And obviously, what really matters, actually, when it comes to international relations, are, to one extent, on one hand, these are the perceptions of the country, and especially the new government of the country, because, as you all know, Poland actually had first presidential elections in the late spring, and then the national elections in October 2015. So it is essentially the reception of the country, the perception of the country, but also the signals the country itself and the new government is essentially emitting and sending concerning such vital issues as foreign policy. Minister Szczerski, who is our today's main speaker, has had a very busy schedule during his brief 2-day-long visit in the UK, because yesterday he was participating in the BBC Hard Talk, right? If I recall correctly. You also actually participated in another event in Chatham House. Then it was, I think, today there was an interview with The Guardian, and now he is basically joining us here at St. Antony's College at the European Studies Center. So obviously, when you have that much attention given to Poland in not just the British, but also Polish mass media, foreign mass media, European mass media, American mass media, think tanks, institutions, newspapers, TV. When it comes to the foreign policy, the first thing which really came to my mind was that if you consider all the signals, but also reception and perception of Poland, the cardinal question is, what is going to be the Polish foreign policy, or what is now the foreign Polish policy 3 or 4 months after the beginning of the new government? So it is essentially the question about the continuity or change or something perhaps in between, which really constitutes the title of today's talk. But let me fully introduce our speakers today. Minister Krzysztof Szczerski, who is Secretary of State in the Office of the President of the Republic of Poland, who is also a practicing academic. So sometimes I feel like I should basically say Minister Szczerski, sometimes Professor Szczerski, or Minister Professor Szczerski. He received his PhD in political sciences from the Jagiellonian University in Krakow, and in his academic work he really focused on European Union affairs as well as European integration. He authored academic articles and monographs, and he's still a member of faculty, a professor at the Institute of Political Sciences and International Relations of the Jagiellonian University in Krakow. But needless to say, he's also a public servant. He's a former Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, also former member of the Polish Parliament, where he represented the Law and Justice Party from 2011 until 2015. And he was also editor-in-chief of Arcana Bi-Monthly, which is a periodical devoted to politics, history, intellectual thought, and culture. And as I said, since the summer, he is Secretary of State in the Office of the President of the Republic. Minister Szczerski's discussant today is going to be Gerhard Gnauck, who is the correspondent of the Welt daily to Poland and several other countries in the region of East Central Europe. He received his PhD in political sciences from the Free University in Berlin. For 2 decades, Gerhard Gnauck has reported extensively on Russia and Eastern Europe for major German newspapers, including Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, Der Tagesspiegel, and of course Die Welt. He's also the author of a few books on Russia, Poland, but also on the late German literary critic Marcel Ranitzky. So I think it really promises to be a very interesting, fascinating seminar. Obviously, what we are going to do is that Minister Szczerski is going to have his talk, followed by brief comments by Gerhard Gnauck, and then after that we should have enough time for what I consider to be a very interesting discussion, Q&A. So without further ado, Minister Krzysztof Szczerski, please.
Okay, shall I sit?
Yes,
okay. If that's fine, that. Good afternoon, everybody. It's an honor, a pleasure to have a chance to speak to such a distinguished audience in Oxford and in St. Antony's College. You have a special, very kind of experience of having German and Paul discussing the foreign affairs in English. That's probably the sign of the English being the Latin of today. So I would try to get the sketches on the basics of the Polish foreign policy in how it's planned and how it's realized now in the new political circumstances in Poland. But of course, what I do believe the most interesting for you all would be really the phase of the questions and answers, because that's always the most lively part of any kind of seminar. So as I remember it from my academic experience. So just then a few sketches, so you have for you to catch the basic lines of the new current government and the current president of Poland vision on the foreign affairs. First of all, I would say there are three main pillars of what this policy is built on. First of all, there is a deep conviction expressed also by the President Duda in his speech in the United Nations 2015 that it is the violation of international law and attempts to undermine the post-Cold War order in Europe that pose a fundamental threat to the security of our continent. Especially that the violation of international law, it's really the threat to the basics of international relations and the peaceful relations between the nation states and in the global world, and that we have seen and we have witnessed in the last years. That the international law was really endangered, and then it was really violated, and that the violation of international law has actually occurred not only in a distant fallen states, but also has been we're witnessing that in the closest environment of our continent. In fact, in Europe itself, with the war on Ukraine. Was a pure violation of international law. So, without restoring the basic fundamental stability of international law, we could not really project the stable international relations in Europe and the world itself. So it's not only that history has not ended; that it's also that. It's developing into the path of which is endangering the basics of peaceful cooperation between the states, which is the international law. So Poland is very much advocating and would advocate the restoring of all the institutions that would stand by international law and international order based on regulations and instruments that are in the hands of United Nations and all the other organizations that stands by international law. So this is the one. So this is the first thing, because if we allow the order to be built on the pure force, then there is no peaceful place in the world. If we allow the borders of the states to be changed by a pure force, then none of the states is really safe. It does not include only that far distant parts of the world, but also this also applies to the very heart of Europe. And this is a very new and unique situation. Secondly, the second basis for what is our plans is the fact that we do believe that the security of Europe cannot come as a result of a transaction between those who stick to the freedom and law on one hand and those who violate them on the other hand. Because as we know from our history, no system founded on the balance of antagonistic forces has ever been able to guarantee a permanent peace in Europe. So it's not the transaction, it's not the appeasement, it's not any other forms of this kind of transactions between aggressive and aggressive actor and those who pretend to appease them. Which normally results in the cost of this smaller or weaker, can really guarantee a permanent peace or stability. So we want to advocate, and we don't want. Actually, on the other hand, we would like to stop any attempts of this kind of transaction. That is for us a false path to make a stability environment in Europe. That also means, of course, that we are against any kind of implementation of new concept of the concerto of the mighty, or concept of the few powers. That can actually divide and rule of the global affairs, because we all know that we are always the victims of the concert of the superpowers, as a Poland. And thirdly, which is also important, probably in nowadays in the current stage of the media attention, which was already mentioned, I would like to stress very much that Poland and the Polish foreign policy is stick to the idea of the unity of Europe, and is stick to the idea of the unity of the Western free world, also in its transatlantic form. Because we all know that we are benefiting from the unity of Europe, and we are losing when the Europe is divided. So Poland would never be the factor of dismantling the Western world or the Western community or the Western alliance. In a European and in the transatlantic form. So Poland is loyal and would remain the loyal part of the of all these Western organizations, of the organization of the Western world. So these are the three major things that are the fundaments, the founding blocks of the whole strategy we are working on. So international law, non-transaction stability, and the Euro-Atlantic unity. That's the three founding blocks. Upon them, of course, we put for ourselves the most important goals or aims of the politics that we would like to achieve. And the first of them, surely for Poland, it is obvious, is the security. Yeah? We and if you think and if you discuss the foreign policy in Poland with any of the political forces or anybody that is actually somehow interesting in the foreign policy, you would receive the same answer. What is the most important goal for the Polish foreign policy? Is to guarantee the security of the state. Because Poland is, as you know, placed in the very special geographical environment in Europe. We are on the crossroads of Europe, and we know that security in this context is the most vital part of the foreign policy. Security in all means, of course, starting with the classical security, with the hard power, ending up in the new forms of security, which is environmental security, energy security, and the economic security. And if we want to elaborate it more, then we can discuss it in the other forms of security during the Q&A part of our meeting. But to the first one, this hard power, this classical security, of course, for us, for the year 2016, there is no more utmost important event that we are focusing now on is the NATO summit in Warsaw. NATO summit in Warsaw that we believe should be a summit that is decision-making, forward-looking, and comprehensive point of the real adaptation of an alliance to the new environmental security environment of an alliance. What do we see it as the most important for us is, of course, the fact that the NATO at Warsaw Summit should come back to its basic rule of guaranteeing the security of the allied territory, with no exceptions and on the cohesive manner. That means the whole territory of alliance is defended, and it's on a cohesive way. In the reality, that means we should extend the presence of a NATO in the eastern flank, and we should be able as an alliance to answer the challenges coming from the south. And those are two most important issues as far as the security is concerned at the NATO summit. As the eastern flank is concerned, is of course what is our main negotiation goal is to change the Wales philosophy of reinforcement as an answer to growing military potential of Russia on the eastern flank of NATO. Instead of reinforcement strategy, we would like to have a combination of reinforcement and presence. That means it's not only the capacity to reinforce the eastern allies, it's to have NATO infrastructure, troops, and surveillance instruments at the eastern flank, in situ, in the countries of the eastern flank. The same applies to the southern flank, of course, but the difference is that the eastern flank, we all know what the strategy should be. For the southern flank, still we are lacking the cohesive strategy of the NATO, and we are lacking the mandate for actions of NATO in the southern flank. So there is still things to be discussed. At the same time, with growing deterrence potential of a NATO on the eastern flank, we are advocating as a Poland to combine it with the strategy of dialogue with Russia. It's not that we want, because it's not us who it was Mr. Medvedev who actually said in Munich about the new Cold War. We are not advocating new Cold War. We don't want to build so to say the balance of destructive balance on the Polish eastern border between us and Russia. We would like to build up the defensive capacity of the NATO in the eastern flank against the offensive capacity of Russians on the eastern flank and in our region. And we want to have while building the defensive capacities, we want to, of course, engage in the dialogue, because dialogue is a kind of also the means of the peace. But of course, coming back to these three fundamental pillars, this dialogue with Russia must be based on obeying the international law. Otherwise, it's not the dialogue, and it's not something that we can really achieve a kind of permanent stability. So the dialogue with Russia, yes, but based on the international law. Otherwise, it's in this context, the sanctions is a part of the international and legal answer to the violation of international law. Sanctions are not the revenge. Sanctions are the instruments of the legal answer in the international relations. So that means sanctions should be kept because it is the legal instrument. It's not the kind of political or any other means. The instruments of another purpose. So the security and the NATO summit is the main, by utmost, the main important goal for this year. Second is the question of the EU reform, because we all know that European Union is now really facing the number of fundamental crises that really posing the question marks on the basics of the European integration model. And I'm here in such a distinguished audience that I shouldn't even try to elaborate more on the fact on all the European crises starting from the migration, ending going through the eurozone, ending in the overregulation and so on. So we are the part of the pro-reform group of the states of members of the European Union. Yes, we are one of the in this group of advocating the reform of the European Union. And to be honest, if I look at the Brexit document, I mean anti-Brexit document, that it's the UK settlement that is now being negotiated in Brussels just right now. When I look at and I read the text, I know what is your impression from the text prepared by Donald Tusk for the UK settlement. But one thing is actually shocked me the most in the text, that part of it is actually titled sovereignty. The word sovereignty was supposed to be wiped out of a European language forever. If you read the text of this pro-European like Spinelli group or the avant-garde of the European movements, then the first sentence they always put on in their project is that the sovereignty of the nation states is the concept of the past. Now, if you look at this UK settlement documents written by the Eurocrats, it was not written by anybody else than just the cabinet of the president of the European Council. They restored the word sovereignty into the heart of the new kind of relations between the EU and its member states. That's very, very significant and interesting. Of course, that has as always every stick has got two ends. So it's an interesting one, but also a kind of one that should worry us, because the sovereignty will lead to the destroying of the community method and the destroying of the those commonalities we have on a market, these four freedoms, and the rest of of achievements of the European integration, that of course would lead to the destroying of the whole project. But still, if we can combine the community with the sense of sovereignty, that may lead us to the model we are very much advocating, which is in a slogan, Twitter way, we call it the Europe of free nations and equal states. So not the Europe of the nation states, as because that's the concept of the past, but what we are saying is the Europe of free nations and equal states. And we do believe that equal states, and coming back to the roots of the European integration, that we listen to each other and we're really trying to find a consensus in the European Union, rather than building hierarchical, vertical European governance model, is the way that really enrich European Union rather than harm it. And the migration policy, the story of migration policy, is the best example of how the vertical governance of Europe, with the very narrow center of decision making, is actually playing against the whole idea of the European integration. Because we know all now, 6 months after September 2015, that all the policy that was prepared by this very small caucus of decision making in the European Union, that means opening up the Willkommenspolitik plus reallocation, it simply does not work. It simply does not work. So we are 6 months after that, with the hundreds of thousands of people that are victims of this mistake, of this fault, of this wrong decision, and we are now now we are trying to find a new solution for the same crisis, exactly with the lines that was expressed openly 6 months ago. So we are actually coming back to the proposals that were put on the table 6 months ago by the states that time, which were put aside in the decision-making process, were not listened to. One of those states are Poland, which then with the President Duda, because he was already in office, the government was the government change was just about to happen, but the Polish leadership expressed exactly the receipt for the migration crisis, which is now on the table, but that was 6 months ago. And then, because of this vertical decision-making process in the European Union, that was neglected. This path was neglected. So we are now paying the price for that 6 months later, with the hundreds of thousands of people on the soil of European Union, and with a complete catastrophe of the reallocation strategy. So this shows the fact that if we would have been open to discussing on the equal between the equal states, and in an open, frank, and consensual way in the September 2015, maybe I'm not sure that. Well, it's always easy to say the alternative history, but maybe we would have been now in a completely different situation. Because now we are, as I said, we are discussing the question of securing the external borders of the EU. We're working and making working more closely with Turkey, having more aid to Jordan and Lebanon. It's all now just being discussed, and that was, as I said, presented to our partners 6 months ago. So that's why we are believing in a union of free nations and equal states, also as a model of governance. So that's so NATO and the security reform of the EU. We can elaborate it more in a discussion. The aim number 3 is, of course, the strengthening of the Polish Eastern policy, because as we say in Poland, in the West we are playing with the interests. In the East we are dealing with the existence of Poland. So the security question and the future of our and European Union and NATO Eastern neighborhood is by far geographically the most important pivot area of Polish foreign policy. And in the East, we know that every day brings the new situation. Now today, we're witnessing the collapse of the Ukrainian governing coalition, which really makes the things troublesome. And because we all know, and we are trying to persuade that to our fellow friends from Ukraine, that in the end of the day, it's the efficiency of the Ukrainian state that will be decisive factor in the future of this country. If the state of Ukraine is not effective, then it becomes the space, not the state. And the space, you can actually divide. You can do something with the space of the Ukraine. If you are dealing with the state of Ukraine, this is the partner. This is the actor. This is someone that you can actually build the relations with. If it's just a space which is governed by some groups and unknown forces, then it's the space. The vacuum always welcomes the neighbors. So we really want to build the effective state of Ukraine. Belarus, as you know, it's also the new thing. The sanctions has been lifted, and that's a gesture of the openness. We can discuss it in details further. So the Eastern policy for us is as I said, the pivot area. The thing number 4 is the new activity of Poland in the region. What was defined by the President Duda as ABC, but that only works with Polish. ABC goes Adriatic, Baltic, and the Black Sea, because Black Sea in Poland is a Czarne Morze. So we start with the sea, so it goes well in the Polish politics. ABC. Generally, we are talking about someone who is more nostalgic, talking about the intermarium policy, because that's the historical concept. But nowadays, we just called about the community between the Adriatic, Baltic, and the Black Sea. That really means the invigorating the regional cooperation among the states, starting from the Baltics, ending in the Balkans. For us, it is again a very important instrument of the building the north-south axis of the European politics. That were by far for many years, also after the 1989, the whole politics of Europe was dominated by the east-west axis. We really believe in a north-south axis, also including the Scandinavia. And but that's not kind of geopolitical concept. It's a concept of the very practical one. We just want to interconnect the countries from Estonia to Croatia, from Bulgaria to Poland. Because the problem is that the countries of this part of Europe are neither political nor infrastructurally interconnected. That's what we are always joking with the president is that the basic test is the question, answering to the question, to whom you call first when you have a problem. From Bratislava, from Budapest, from Zagreb, or from Tallinn. Are you phoned to your neighbor, to your fellow country in the region, or are you phoned to the capitals on the west or on the east, whatever you choose? That's a signal of a strategic community, and we would like really to have to call first to your regional neighbor, and to discuss the problem within your regional neighbors. But also that means also the question of infrastructural interconnection, roads, energy infrastructure, transport, energy, environment, and telecommunications. The four spheres of this infrastructure, and we really would like to see the Central Europe interconnected after the current phase of structural funds, because we know each of our country actually spends a quite significant sum of money on a public investment in this four kinds of infrastructure: environment, transport, energy, and telecommunication. But we don't really coordinate this public investments between each other. Nowadays, when the distance is actually being counted not by the miles or kilometers, but by the hours of driving or hours of travel, the Bucharest is much far away from Warsaw than Madrid or Paris. There are few flights, there are bad roads, there are no train connections, and it's so people just do not travel to each other. And when one company actually is winning the contract to build the new factory, the new production site in Slovakia, was that recently with the whatever car company it was. The titles in Polish press is Poland lost, Slovakia won. That means we don't think the region won the new investment, so the Polish workers can go to Slovakia and have a decent work, because we know that they are going to Britain or somewhere. They wouldn't move to Slovakia to work in the car factory, because no, it is Slovaks who won the factory, and we have lost this factory. And so this is the thing we want to change, because otherwise we will rather be we see each other as a competing nations in the sphere of economy, and not connected nations in the infrastructure. So that will work against the interest of the whole region. And last two things, or three, just to say briefly. The current government of Poland would pay much more attention to the interest and the role and position of the Poles abroad. You see that Poland is the Poles abroad is one of the most important asset of Polish foreign policy, and of Poland itself and the Polish economy. Of course, we're not talking about only about the intra-European migration, but also about the well-settled Poles from all waves of migration from Poland. And you know that it's 38 million of us in Poland, and it's 21 million abroad. So that altogether makes us 60 million. And if you count the Polish birth rate and this balance of the birth rates and in the demographic balance of Poland, we are diminishing in the numbers in Poland. So there's more deaths than the births in Poland nowadays. But if you only count the new Poles being born in the United Kingdom, we are on a surplus again. So so actually, as a nation, worldwide nation, we are still growing in numbers. We are just diminishing in the numbers in Poland itself, in the homeland of Poland. So, but you know, in the Polish politics, you divide the Poles abroad into two groups. We call Polonia, that's those who emigrated from Poland, and the others we call Poles abroad, and that's who actually live where they have been always living, but the Poland has changed its border, so they are now Poles abroad. That, of course, that means the Poles in the eastern in the countries of our eastern neighborhood. So we have a different strategy for the Poles abroad and the Polonia, but altogether they are the very big asset of the Polish foreign policy. And of course, as we are living in the global world, the last important thing is that part of the special presidential activity in the foreign policy would be finding partners for the Polish economic growth and investment. Some of you who follow the Polish politics more closely, we've just been announced the huge investment plan in Poland for next tens of years of reindustrialization of the Poland in the spheres of new technologies. And to realize that, we need a new global partners in materials and in the innovations and in technological cooperation. So President, part of his foreign policy is to promote the investment partnership with Poland, and he started quite intensively with his first of this kind of visits. That was the visit to China in the end of last year, and he was presiding the Central European China summit in the end of last year. Well, I can tell you much more in the details, but I think it's already too long. So this is the basics as we see the coming months of 2016 for us. But of course, I have not touched all challenges that are ahead of us. So I'm very open for all the questions, and I hope I would be able to give an answer to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. And Gerhard Gnauck.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. So we both came from Warsaw, by the way. Yeah. Let me refer to a few points you made and perhaps add something more afterwards. The political quotation I perhaps like most is a sentence said by Lord Balfour some 90 years ago. His words were, I quote, "Our whole political machinery," referring to United Kingdom, "presupposes a people so fundamentally at one that they can safely afford to bicker, to quarrel." End of quote. Foreign policy should not be an issue to bicker and to quarrel about. This has been understood even in a country so deeply divided as Poland. For many times over the past decades, this rule or this maxim has been repeated by politicians and commentators alike. And that is very good, of course. When we look now at the new government, well, I think there is You did not directly refer to, is there a lot of continuity? You put forward a lot of changes. So I would ask, are these really good changes, and what will they bring about? To come to some of your points, not all of them, certainly. First of all, war in Ukraine, I agree with what you said. I am rather a critic of the German position, although I think Germany has learned a lot about the events and the situation in the east of Europe over the past 2 years. And I would just underline, Poland has, even if it is not present at the table in the negotiations in the Normandy format, it has played a good role. President Duda, as well as Foreign Minister Waszczykowski, have reminded the world about the most difficult problem in all that, which is Crimea. And President Duda and Minister Waszczykowski both said, or in the words of the Minister Waszczykowski, the NATO-Russia Council may convene, we are not against it, quote, under condition that one of its topics be the Crimea question and the war in Ukraine, end of quote. I believe Poles are perhaps the only significant force in Europe who are even reminding the public of Crimea, that it should stay on the table. So, in the words, this is very okay, but what about the actions? Actions speak louder than words. Are you willing and are you able to organize, for example, combined missions as Minister Sikorski in the previous government did? I would like to remind you, Sikorski organized common visits with his German counterparts as well, Westerwelle, as well as Steinmeier, to St. Petersburg, to Minsk, to Kiev, where I had the opportunity to go with them, and notably to Kiev even twice, the second time being with the French Foreign Secretary Fabius and ending up with the great document, and then with Yanukovych fleeing the revolution, as you remember. So to organize this sort of missions, you need, of course, harmony and understanding and trust between you and your other European partners. This would be a question, does the new government and the president have this harmony and this trust to get, on the side of the other partners in Europe? Another point, NATO Eastern Flank. You formulated it that way. You're striving for a combination of reinforcement and presence. Without going into details, my German friends and colleagues and German diplomats often say, more or less like that, Poland is demanding the impossible. They want bases, regular bases of NATO, permanent bases in Poland. This will not happen, this cannot happen, this should not happen. So I always answer them then, well, Poland is demanding the impossible to get the possible. And that is, I presume, a rational action and a strategy. And I think Poland has already achieved something. We have nearly all the time, on a rotation basis, German soldiers, British soldiers, American soldiers. Then there is a second idea of these permanent bases for vehicles and ammunition, which would be there on the spot already. And a third point I would mention, although it's a broader security field, is that in the next weeks, as I understand, the building of the missile shield in Pomerania near Slupsk will start. So there are interesting developments in this field. So I tend not to overestimate what comes out of the NATO summit in July. It will be, to some extent, a cosmetic question, a question of words, persistent or permanent presence or whatever. You came to the refugee crisis and you said Poland suggested 6 months ago what now is on the table again in this crisis. I believe that you and many Polish politicians had this criticism in your heads 6 months ago, but I didn't hear so much from the Polish side then. Okay, President Duda only took office in August, and the Szydło government only in October, November. But I think since then you should have avoided, and you could have avoided perhaps, the situation where Poland and other countries, by the way, are portrayed as xenophobic, egoistic, etc. How could you have avoided that? Well, I just recently read Henry Kissinger's comment on Germany's refugee policy. He said something like this, that civilization has not seen for thousands of years that the region does not defend its borders. That's a beautiful sentence, I think. You could have said that. Instead, unfortunately, we've heard words, for example, by Jarosław Kaczynski about migrants carrying diseases, etc. And words like this have a disastrous effect on the perception of Poland, and not only the perception. One last point as far as these merytoryczne kwestie are concerned. Poles abroad and Polonia. Well, I am familiar with the German Polonia situation since the 1980s. I have observed it from very close, and I must say this will be a very tough work. This will be in Polish niewdzięczna robota, because I believe that these emigres, especially in Germany for some reasons, but also in many other countries, they have all sorts of goals, but I think not the goal to become a sort of NGO or a group or a collective body which takes action and takes part in politics, something like that. William Hague, yes, I'll fit in that. I'm coming more or less to the end already, but it's a longer end. William Hague, the Foreign Secretary of Britain till recently, speaking about British foreign policy and the need to balance values and pragmatism, said, that was about 2 years ago, I think, sometimes you have to try, quote, to influence people with whom you don't agree or whom you regard as unpleasant, end of quote. I retranslated it from German. This is exactly, to influence people and to make business, to deal with people with whom you don't agree or whom you don't like. I'm afraid this is exactly what many people in the governing party in Poland, in the Peace Party, don't like or don't believe to be necessary. And this concerns foreign policy and even more domestic politics. So, when 3 American senators from both parties wrote to Prime Minister Beata Szydło about the new laws in Poland that, I quote, Senator McCain and 2 other senators, I quote, these laws could serve to diminish democratic norms in Poland, including the rule of law and independence of the judiciary. We appeal to you, we urge you to recommit to the shared democratic values enshrined in the Helsinki Accords and the EU Charter. These are strong words, and what did the Prime Minister Beata Szydło answer? I quote again, the interest and goodwill of American politicians cannot transform into teaching us and imposing measures concerning the internal affairs of my fatherland. Minister Waszczykowski said in a similar way. This is the American example. Germany, of course, also has difficulties to understand where Poland is heading. I know it from many conversations, for example, with German diplomats. they hear the harsh messages meant for the Polish public, and then behind closed doors, actually, well, when talking to Mr. Minister Waszczykowski, for example, they see, well, actually good manners. You can talk to them. You can perhaps even do business with them. But it is still a sort of unusual situation. And I think, as you said, Mr. Kunicki, about the perception of Poland, well, I'm afraid that there are many forces now in Warsaw who believe, or seem to believe, that perception of Poland outside is, we don't care. So, Minister Szczerski, please convince me that this perception will not harm Polish interests. That is one of the questions with which I will now really come to the end. Maybe 3 questions. One of them, you said you said Poland will not be a factor of dismantling the European Union. So my question would be, would really the new government in Poland and the president, do they want to help the European Union to persist? And what would you sacrifice for that? I see in the Brexit negotiations, which you know better than I do, of course, that in the question of child benefits, I don't have the impression so far that Poland really is ready to sacrifice something for the unity of the European Union. That's one question. Maybe a last question, maybe a bit academic, maybe a bit historic, but in the Polish debate now, there is a tendency, well, to say everything what our predecessors did was bad, and we are inventing foreign policy, and we are inventing everything from zero. So to counter this tendency, I would like to ask you, what do you consider the most successful fields of foreign engagement of the Polish governments of the years 2007, 2015? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much.